Hey everybody, KC here. So this is it, part 4 of my conversation recorded at the Organic Produce Summit last week in Monterey, California with Robby Cruz, VP of Produce at Target, and Patrick Haines, VP of Produce at UNFI. And a couple of things we talk about in this final piece are, one, what do vendors need to understand about retailers' needs that maybe they don't get? And I thought this was an interesting one. The impact of climate change on growers and the impact that's going to have on retailers and selection. Fascinating conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it. Here you go. Robby Cruz, Patrick Haines, the Organic Produce Summit. Enjoy. We don't have a ton of time left, but I do have a couple of quick questions, so I'm hoping for a couple of quick answers. The room is filled with vendors. You're both on the retail side. If you had one message to send to the vendors in terms of what you need from them that you're not getting, what would it be?
I think the best ones are doing it already, but it's a plan to have really great surety of supply and enough steps in place to mitigate the risks, that are coming and that we have, because the customers really rely on that product all the time, and they expect it and they need it. It's a huge challenge, but I think that to provide the best service level to our customers is the biggest single opportunity we have.
I say transparency. We need to have more transparency with our key vendor partners out there and understand, what does your multi-year strategic plan look like? How does that tie into the retailer that you're at? And then how do we work together to be able to continue to eliminate costs but still bring the surprise and delight to the guests?
Is it critical to share that level of transparency with the shopper?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think transparency goes both ways, right? I'm sure as a grower, they're going to want to understand, where are we going? What does our remodel schedule look like? What does our new stores of the future look like? How do we continue to help them increase their category as we move forward? But that transparency has to be back and forth. I think the guest definitely wants the transparency as, how did this product make it here? And what we see is a lot of the younger generations want that transparency. They want to understand, how did that product grow? How did that product actually get from Washington all the way to Florida? It's amazing still out there that people don't realize that apples are not grown year round, but it's kind of scary.
You made a comment just almost parenthetically a few minutes ago about it being 90 degrees outside. It is in fact about 64 degrees outside here.
It's 115 in Arizona, so it feels like
listen,
fantastic.
I was amazed. I've talked to a bunch of people who from Monterey, and they're talking about how hot it is. I'm on the East Coast where it's like 95 degrees and 195% humidity, so I'll trade you. But the quick question, how do you factor in the whole notion of climate change and the impact that's having on growing seasons and product availability? How do you factor that? Are you constantly sort of changing your expectations and your business plan to account for that?
It's an ongoing challenge, and we see growers popping up with growing areas, new growing areas that we've never really considered, and we've had growing areas that have been absolutely reliable and dependable for generations that all of a sudden are much, much, much less reliable. So it's factoring into all of our discussions with our suppliers all the time, with the sourcing team, getting ahead, what's next? I mean, that's really the biggest question. It's a big challenge for us.
They say Northern Michigan Pinot Noir is going to be the coming thing.
It's very possible. It's very possible. I wouldn't put it past at all.
Climate change.
The same thing. I think diversity for each of these growers. If they've always grown in a certain area of the country, they need to be more diverse. Look at other states. Even look at the commodities that they're actually growing in there, right? If all of a sudden now the nights are warmer and the days are hotter, then they're going to have to look at what commodity are they actually growing there, and could they move to find other space.
Yeah. Last question, which is when we all come back here in 2030, God willing, and we're talking, we're focusing on what the hot, no pun intended, trend is at the moment. I'm curious what you think it might be, and I know change happens so fast. Thinking that far out is almost impossible. But if you had to guess, what do you think we'll be really focusing on then?
I think that the whole concept of soil health, regenerative activities, is going to be a really big deal, not just because it's maybe cool and maybe neat, but I think it's going to be required because the pressure that the climate change is putting onto the planet and into the growing areas, we've got to have a stronger soil base in order to help support some of that change.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think when you still think about digital and the ease for that guest, like I think that's going to continue to grow. Believe it or not, I have 4 older kids. Youngest is 20. We got 3 grandkids coming around.
Oh my God.
But like when I talk to my kids, are 20, 22, 25, and 27 years old, when they shop for groceries, it's all on their phone. It's not going into the grocery store. They're not looking for what that is. And so as that demographic continues to get older, the new ones coming in are going to be looking even for more of that kind of content. And so I think we got to stay further ahead what that looks like. As we look at it from Target's point of view, is what does our stores look like of the future? Like how are we going to continue to make sure that we have all these drive-up spaces and these delivery options that we have? We have a store in Hawaii that actually has 40 drive-up spaces. People are literally doing their orders when they land on the plane when they get to Hawaii just to go pick it up at a Target before they go to their Airbnb or go to their hotel. And so
Really?
you have to think about like that's now, and if we think 3, 5, 10 years down the road, what does that look like? How do we look at the coolers in our back room, and how do we have that type of holding power?
And that challenge is even more difficult for you guys because you might believe that 1,000%, but then you have to convince your retailers of making those kinds of infrastructural changes that small independent retailers sometimes have a difficult job of
and actually, Kevin, that's one thing that I've learned coming to UNFI. And one reason why I came was to help make those retailers as competitive as they possibly can be. And there's definitely a gap with some of the digital experience that they're able to offer right now. And as a company, UNFI is trying to help bring them along. They're offering some services, some media network, UNFI Media Network, and some services to help them get a much stronger online presence because you have to have it. I mean, it is a requirement in today, and it'll be more of a requirement tomorrow.
I think you guys are right on. I think that the notion that at a certain point our children are going to say, "Oh, now I'm going to shop like my parents did when they were my age," is a foolish assumption and is almost certainly going to be wrong. I also have to say my kids are 38, 35, and 30. Nobody's married and nobody's pregnant, so I have to go home and tell them to get on the stick because they are clearly underperforming. Before I wrap this up and ask you to give these guys a tremendous round of applause, I want to piggyback on something that Nick said, which is it's about 10 years ago that Matt Seeley came up to me at a conference we were both at on Cape Cod, of all places, and told me about this thing he was planning to do called the Organic Produce Summit, and said, I'd love you to be a part of it. And I have been thrilled and quite frankly privileged to have been here every year that this thing has existed. The only year we missed was the COVID year. I'm not saying goodbye because I'm not going anywhere, but I also wanted to point out that it's Matt's vision that has really, and the rest of the team's vision that has really driven this all these years, and I think that they deserve a tremendous round of applause while you give these guys a round of applause as well.